Welcome to the PetroPapers podcast. Say that 10 times fast. This is where you get your oil and gas intellectual stimulation by asking the technical questions. I'm Pradhan, and with me here today, I have Matt Cashatt from Polyrific. Today, we are going to interview Matt based on his career trajectory and provide some advice to our young professional viewers and listeners how to make technical contributions to the industry. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, I was just going to go ahead and get straight to it. How'd you get here? Tell us your career path.
Sure. So how did I get here in tech, or specifically in oil and gas? We'll start with tech. And I see you've got a buddy there in the lower corner of the screen. That's great. So I was a child of the 90s. I grew up in the 90s when the internet was first kind of taking off, and it changed everything in terms of how people manage information. And I knew back then, as a teenager in high school, starting to play with the internet as it was rising in popularity, that information management was the space that I wanted to be in. But I went to school at Texas A&M, Gig'em Aggies, and I majored in construction science because that was something that was kind of a family connection. There was a lot of people in my dad built power plants, so large, heavy industrial projects, so closely related to energy, closely related to people in the oil and gas field. So I kind of knew that culture. And I went in, and as I graduated from Texas A&M and started getting into the field of construction, I realized, here I love reading about all this tech, and the industry in construction, is like 10, 12 years behind. At least that's the way it kind of felt to me. And so I started looking at doing some consulting on the side. I learned how to code. I'd stay up. I was a project manager, so I'd go to the job site and do what I needed to do. Come home at 6. I was a young father at the time, had kids, get them to bed, make a pot of coffee, get the coding books and the laptop out, and learn how to code. And one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was switching career paths and going into to tech and developing solutions for different companies. So yeah, that's how I got here.
Awesome. So how'd you get into oil and gas then?
Well, as I built my business, which is Polyrific, we needed to get clients and solve problems, and so I looked into construction, and we did some stuff there, and we looked into insurance, and I started thinking, brainstorming, what other industries do I know of that probably are a little bit behind the curve in terms of technology. Oil and gas is a big one. It's the only industry I know where, there's service companies out there that are still doing millions of dollars of business a week on paper and in Excel. So it was a big opportunity for us to kind of get in and do some good. And so, yeah, that got us into the oil field.
Perfect. Well, that segues beautifully to the next question I was going to ask you. What does your company do? What does Polyrific do?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of we build technical solutions, software-based solutions, primarily for enterprises. And what does that actually mean? So, for some of our customers out there in the Permian Basin, or in Houston, or wherever in the oil and gas industry, it is a lot of integration. So you're using a lot of different software. We can help you on the back end integrate all that together. We can help you build a better data strategy and data platform so that you can make good use of all the data that's available to you. And that's becoming more and more important in the age of AI, which is really where we are now. We build better ways for your employees to communicate, for your managers to manage the process of whatever it is that you do, and to gain better data insights from that. And then increasingly, we are an AI forward company. So while we still have what we call our foundational services, which is, like I said, data strategy, application development, application integration. We are helping companies now, including a lot of our oil and gas clients, adopt AI and sort of integrate that into their processes. So that starts with a lot of them not really understanding at all, how it can fit, but having an instinct that it can. And we help them kind of articulate those goals and strategies and turn those into actionable solutions.
Perfect. No, that sounds very interesting, and there's definitely a need for this in the oil and gas industry. So I'm really glad that you're filling that gap.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we have a lot of listeners that wonder about how to make different contributions to the industry and how they can add value, and wanted to get your input on this, considering their career path and how you started Polyrific, what are some pieces of advice you can provide to those viewers and listeners of this podcast of making those kinds of contributions to the industry?
Okay, so as it relates to tech, I guess,
Yes,
tech
as
or
it
AI.
relates to tech. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think the biggest thing that they can do if they're interested in the tech side or the info management side or the AI side, pay attention to data. Make sure you understand. You don't have to get too technical about this, but understand the basics of how data is managed, what unstructured data is versus structured. Structured something in a database. Unstructured can be, a stack of PDFs that you have laying around, like drilling and completion reports, something like that. This all has every bit of data is important. It's all valuable, even if it doesn't seem that way to you. Data holds insights, especially when taken together as a mass, that you as an individual might not see. So understand just a little bit about data. You don't have to be a SQL expert or something like that, but understand a little bit, and solve problems. So pay attention for problems in your process. You don't need to know how to be a software engineer or an AI engineer. That's not really the point, because an AI engineer or a software engineer, even the best ones in the world, if they don't have a problem to solve, the skills aren't that useful. What you need to do is pay attention to a domain problem. So understand like what you're looking at in terms of if you're out there in the field and there's a way to make people safer, a way to help you account better for, say, chemical that you're treating wells with or whatever. Find those domain problems, and then that's what gets you into the kind of tech and AI space, because now you actually have a problem to solve. So
Those are some great pieces of advice. I know those our viewers and listeners will definitely benefit from what you have to say and will be inspired by your journey as well. There's one more question I wanted to ask you before I let you go. And
sure.
you alluded to this a little bit as far as solving problems, but what motivates you to solve oil and gas problems?
Yeah, it's not just oil and gas. I think I can speak to why do I want to solve problems across the board. First of all, I love the tech. I truly have a passion. To me, the first time I wrote a bit of code that made something happen, something dumb like a dialogue pop up on a screen, it felt like magic. And it's like, wow, I did that. That's such a cool thing. I don't get to write a lot of code anymore. I just don't have the time for it, but I do get to steer the development. We're working on a product right now that is an AI operations platform for the enterprise. It's called Slingshot Operating System. I get to steer kind of the vision for that and what we want it to do for people. And that leads me to like the more important thing that motivates me now. We're all saturated with information. We have to context switch between so many different data sources and applications and things throughout our day that if we're not careful, it kind of robs us of our time with our kids, with our family, with the people we love, with our friends, just enjoying life, the things that make us human. So as an AI guy, the things that make us human is really important to me. And if we can help, if my company, Polyrific, can help in some small way to give people some of their time back and to keep them safer and to make companies more profitable so that they can pay their people more, that's a huge win. So that's a big motivator.
Perfect. No, as I mentioned before, filling in that gap is so important, and time is very important too. It's definitely something that people take for granted and
Mhm.
don't realize that they don't have enough, or they just don't have enough of. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, one of the things I kind of bug everybody around me, my family, my coworkers, teammates, is I like to say time is your most valuable commodity and you can't check the balance of it. So you really never know how much you have left. I mean, you might have 30 seconds left, the guy or gal listening to this, or you might have 30 years. You just don't know. So you got to make the most of it. I mean, otherwise, what are we doing all this for? And enjoy your life, enjoy your time. And that's why I love the solutions we build, is because they do save people time.
Excellent. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the podcast and thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Yoshi.
Well, folks, I'm going to put the Polyrific website on the description box below for our Apple Podcasts and YouTube video, as well as some other information about the company and the solutions that they provide. This is Yoga Pradhan, and we're signing off.